Days, why are we treating yours like a funeral?
Balls, I don't want to be lectured.
And as always, before I run down the list of celebrity birthdays, if you're celebrating your birthday today, happy birthday. And you share your birthday with these famous people. Okay, are you ready? It's a short list, so hang on. Art Garfunkel of Simon and Garfunkel is 72. Actor and playwright Sam Shepard, remember him from The Right Stuff? He is 70. Singer Bryan Adams is 54. Tilda Swinton of Michael Clayton, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, is 53. And Kevin Jonas of the Jonas Brothers is 26. Told you it was a short list. Those are the celebrity birthdays for today. Now it's time for Today in History. And I have room for one passenger in the time machine, in the DeLorean, so I've chosen you. Yeah, come on up here. Let's get in the car. Okay, let me turn on the time circuits, start the engine, shut off the radio, and away we go. And we go back to November 5th, 1492. November 5th, 1492. Christopher Columbus saw corn for the very first time. Christopher Columbus saw corn for the first time November 5th, 1492. I understand by 1493 he had a bumper crop. I was going to say he was watching Hee Haw, but I preferred my joke better. For more of Today in History, let's switch things over to the Associated Press.
November 5th, 1940.
My conscience will not let me turn my back upon a call to service.
Franklin D. Roosevelt becomes the only American president to win an unprecedented third term in office. Roosevelt serves as president for a total of more than 12 years, longer than any other, when he dies months into his fourth term. 1968. Richard Nixon narrowly wins the White House 8 years after his close loss to John F. Kennedy. With the nation divided over the Vietnam War, President-elect Nixon promises Americans,
This will be an open administration, open to new ideas, open to men and women of both parties, open to the critics as well as those who support us. We want to bridge the generation gap. We want to bridge the gap between the races. We want to bring America together.
1994. Former President Ronald Reagan reveals that he has Alzheimer's disease. He dies nearly 10 years later. Also in 1994, George Foreman becomes boxing's oldest heavyweight champion at age 45.
I just want to go out there, show the world that 45 and 55 is not a death sentence. We can do anything we want to do.
Foreman knocks out Michael Moorer in the 10th round of their fight in Las Vegas. And 1989. Pianist Vladimir Horowitz dies in New York. He was 86 years old. Today in History, November 5th. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
This is Across Our Wide Missouri with Bob Priddy.
About 4,500 football fans had left the stadium that night, pleased their team had romped to a convincing victory that meant a conference championship, the first championship for their new coach. It had been something of an uphill battle. About 2 weeks earlier, the team had played to a tie at 6, and the Friday night before, they'd been beaten in the rain and mud of a Halloween game. Then they had to get ready for the season finale on a Wednesday night. They won the game 42-0. The fans wouldn't realize it for some time, but it was the first page of the greatest football winning streak in Missouri history, and it had just been written. The Jefferson City Jays would not lose again for almost 8 years. The fans would come to use just 2 words to describe what happened. They called it the streak. The story in a minute.
Hi friends, Joe Hafner here. Are you interested in buying, selling, trading, or renting a house? Or maybe you're in the market for buying or selling a car? Or perhaps selling or giving away clothes, furniture, or electronics? Well, I can help you out. Just email me, Joe at Gunther'sHouseOfFriends@gmail.com. That's Gunther's House of Friends at gmail.com. Email me today with your item and or items, and together we'll come up with a creative way to buy, sell, trade, or rent any reasonable item or service that you want. Keep in mind, though, I don't deal with the exchange of firearms, alcohol items, drugs, or anything illegal or immoral. So send me an email today at Gunther's House of Friends at gmail.com.
John V. Adkins, known as Pete, was the new coach at Jefferson City High School in 1958. The native of Mexico, Missouri, had gone to the capital city from Centralia, where his teams had once won 28 games in a row. The Jays needed the victory over Mexico for their third straight conference championship in 1958. The loss the previous Friday to John Burroughs of St. Louis, 13-0, was the first shutout they'd suffered in 31 games, a worthy streak on its own. Several players had missed much of the practices since that Friday night because of lime burns. The normally inert material used to mark the field for some reason reacted in the rain of the Burroughs game and gave many players burns, especially under their pads. But Jefferson City wasted little time rolling over Mexico that night. Could have been worse. 2 touchdowns were nullified because of penalties. The Jays had 446 yards in total offense to just 121 for Mexico. And then the streak began with that one game against Mexico. The Jays finished the year 6-1-2, 5-0-1 in their conference. Many of the players came back the next year to produce only the third undefeated team in school history. Since then, undefeated is a word that often has been referred to the Jefferson City Jays. The winning streak had some remarkable aspects. Former Jefferson City sports writer Jim Veith recalled that for 39 games from November 14, 1961 to October 26, 1965, Jefferson City never trailed in a football game. An entire generation of football players at that high school not only never lost a game, they never knew what it was to be behind. On September 25, 1964, the Jays won their 50th in a row, 40-0 over arch-rival Columbia Hickman. It was a record for 11-man football, surpassing the 49-game streaks of Abilene, Texas, and Independence, Kansas. On November 6th, the Jays rolled to their 56th win in a row, 39-0 over Springfield Central. That broke the mark for all high school football winning streaks held by Pflugerville, Texas, which played 8-man football. Only 2 schools had longer undefeated strings. Tallahassee, Alabama had not lost in 57 but had a tie. Bedford County Tech in Tennessee had 78 games without a loss but had 4 ties, even played some teams not considered high schools. It all ended, though, on October the 7th, 1966, and it was Columbia Hickman that did it. Before a crowd of more than 10,000 in Jefferson City, Columbia scored 3 touchdowns in the second half for a 27-6 victory that was taken bitterly by Jefferson City fans. The Jays had won 71 games in a row. It was a national record at the time. During that 71-game winning streak, the Jays averaged 32 points a game. Opponents averaged only 4. The Jays averaged 272 yards a game rushing. The opponents in those 71 games averaged 64. The streak was a national record until Hudson, Michigan won its 72nd straight game in 1975. It remains the longest winning streak in Missouri high school football history. The Jays under Pete Adkins won 9 state championships, the last one in 1994, the year that the coach won his 400th game in his coaching career. They lost a 10th championship game in 4 overtimes in 89, and Adkins retired after the 94 season. The streak, it began on this date, November 5th, in 1958.
It's quite a cocktail. What happens when you mix Chinese officials with grain alcohol?
Investing, renting, sending your kid to college? Listen to the Marketplace Money podcast. Find it on iTunes or at marketplace.org/podcasts.
From APM in New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the global perspective on business and economics. Which part of this would you prefer me to emphasize? There's news today that economic growth in Europe probably slowed during this second half of the year and that unemployment will stay terribly high. Or I could point out the same European Commission data show that Europe's recovery will continue and that growth next year could come in at 1.1%. The BBC's Andrew Walker looks at it this way.
The Commission's forecasts do confirm the general picture that we've been reporting for some time now, that the Eurozone's economic situation does seem to be stabilising, and we can, it seems, expect some sort of resumption of growth next year. But it has to be said, it is still pretty feeble-looking growth and actually slightly weaker than the previous forecast that we had from the Commission. So for the Eurozone, we're looking at growth of 1.1% next year. Even the year after, 2015, a figure of merely 1.7%. obviously an improvement on where the Eurozone has been in the recent past, but it still hardly counts as a boom.
BBC economics correspondent Andrew Walker. Advocates pushing for high-speed rail in America begin their annual meeting in Los Angeles today. The U.S. High-Speed Rail Association spends a lot of time dreaming about California. Construction is about to begin on a bullet train connecting L.A. and San Francisco. But as Kate Archer-Kent reports, outside of California, the shovel-ready projects are tough to find.
Passenger trains that go about 200 miles per hour are not hard to come by in Europe and Asia. But forget about the U.S. It's even unclear what a nationwide system would cost in the end. Stan Feinsod teaches at San Jose State's Mineta Transportation Institute. To get there, he says, the U.S. will have to stop prioritizing highway spending.
You can't buy more lanes. Passenger rail is a hell of a lot less expensive than building out your highway network.
But high-speed rail has other hurdles. Cato Institute senior fellow Randall O'Toole points to driverless cars and more efficient air travel.
I think the United States is ahead of the rest of the world. Rail makes a lot of sense for freight. It really doesn't make much sense for passengers anymore.
California's new high-speed rail is expected to cost $68 billion and carry more than 100 million people each year. I'm Kate Archer-Kent for Marketplace.
Now let's do the numbers. The FT 100 index in London is down 0.6%, and the blah day for share prices is reflected in stock index futures in the U.S. at the moment. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures all down. American exporters to Europe may not want to hear this, but American travelers might. The euro sank again this morning. It only costs under $1.35 to buy a euro.
Looking for a good read? Visit the Big Book blog at marketplace.org. Listen to author interviews and read excerpts from the Marketplace bookshelf. Online at marketplace.org/thebigbook.
This coming weekend, Chinese leaders meet to hammer out economic reforms they hope will put the world's second biggest economy back on track. On one of the reforms, President Xi Jinping had started the ball rolling a year ago when he ordered government officials to stop with the lavish banquets. And that had a tremendous impact on the sales of Baijiu, a grain alcohol that'll knock you flat. But as Marketplace's China correspondent Rob Schmitz reports, one Chinese company has selected an American to save the day.
Jim Rice became CEO of Shui Jingfeng Baijiu Company nearly a year ago. It was terrible timing.
About the time I arrived, the industry started to go on a slide. So my sales are down 50%. We've just given a warning to the stock market that our profit will be down between 80 and 100%.
Shui Jingfeng, partly owned by multinational Diageo, hired Rice because he's got a good track record of adapting foreign companies like Tyson Foods to China.
And my job role today is to take a very traditional Chinese company and a very traditional Chinese industry and adapt Western practices to it. And I've got to globalize this company.
Rice has to cut staff, prices, and expenses, but his biggest challenge might be a plan to market Baijiu to Americans. Inside Shui Jingfeng's distillery in the city of Chengdu, Rice shows me a 600-year-old Baijiu pit. Next to that, mounds of mud covering a fermenting mixture of grains like rice, corn, and wheat, giving off Baijiu's distinctive odor.
Well, it's sweet and a little bit rancid, I suppose.
This smell, Westerners compare it to anything from nail polish to dumpster juice, is Baijiu's Achilles heel in markets outside of China. The Chinese drink it at room temperature, but if Baijiu is served on ice, the smell is diminished. It's nearly erased if you mix it with other liquids. At a tasting event in California, Rice created 4 Baijiu cocktails. One was a Baijiu mojito. He says they were a hit. Back at the distillery, fresh, hot Baijiu pours out of steamers.
That is 70% alcohol, so it's 140 proof. It's pretty strong stuff.
Rice stands next to a short, smiling man, the master distiller. He offers me a shot of his finest product with both hands. Refusing is out of the question. As they say in China, ganbei.
Wow, my mouth is on fire.
The master distiller grabs the shot glass from my hand and refills it from another vat.
Oh,
I'm good with one. I don't know if I can.
But our master distiller thinks you should try them all.
How many are there?
Okay, well, you don't have to swallow them.
Okay, I'll sip it from here on.
And for this potential American cost